Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Mr. Rader. This is the lesson for AP World History, March 26th. And today, what we're going to look at is a sample LEQ for the AP World Modern exam. And we're going to specifically look at the historical thinking skill of causation. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the metaphor of an iceberg to really better explain the concept of total war. So when you think of an iceberg, there's what's on the surface, the things that we can see at the surface, and then there's everything else that's below the iceberg, which is really the deeper causes for specific things when we look at it through the analogy with historical events. And we're going to be using this to examine the concept of total war and conflicts in world history. For the opening question, I'd like you to put in your Google Doc, when you were thinking about colleges to apply to in the fall, what were some of the factors or causes that influenced your decision? So, for example, were you looking at specific programs? Were you looking at brand name recognition of the college? Were you looking at potential earnings for graduates for those schools? Were you looking at location, how far away it was from your house, the price plans for college? Like, what were some of those things, those ideas that percolated in your minds? So, I do want to just call out that tomorrow on the 27th, I'd like to have a 10 to 15-minute Zoom conference. From those of you that did respond to the request to identify times where you would be available, the majority of you said after 12 or 1 o'clock, so I figured 2 p.m. would be a good time just to kind of see each other and to interact looking at the lesson. So the lesson for tomorrow is going to be on the Russian Revolution. So I figured we could have a Zoom conference that kind of discusses that. Below that, you'll see that I am going to try to have us do a seminar next Tuesday, the 31st of March. And it's on this article that looks at the relationship between wars throughout human history and the environment. I find it to be a really interesting read. I will put up that document tomorrow as well, and I'm going to give you Monday, March 30th in class, like that period, to actually read through that document so that you're prepared for the seminar. And just like when we have our in-person seminars, if you don't have a webcam on your computer or you don't have a smartphone and you can't access and log in at the times everybody else, that's perfectly okay. I will provide a series of questions for you to respond to in writing so that you can still earn the full participation credit. But I think it would be nice for us all to be able to see each other and have a conversation. I had a Zoom meeting with my MUL UN class on Tuesday. My plan was for it to be 45 minutes. They ended up going for the full 2 hours that we normally need. So I think it was a very good experience for those students. So I'd like to do something similar with you all. Okay. So how does the iceberg analogy help us to wrap our heads around causation? So in the document, there'll be a couple of things for you to look at. There is the causation protocol, and that's what you're actually going to have to complete for the essay prompt that you choose to write about. And then the language of causation is really useful because it helps you to kind of think about how you would write about these documents. So there are three possible prompts from the College Board that discuss conflicts that may or may not be considered total wars, but they do organize it by specific periods in world history. So this is the iceberg. So just like the analogy of an actual iceberg, where just a little bit, the tip of the iceberg is the most obvious examples, then what you can see on the surface, and then below the surface, what's happening. And then as you go further and further down, like what are the deeper historical forces that may not immediately make you think about a particular issue in terms of its causes? So the consideration of the larger societal forces. Okay, so the idea is to utilize this tool to outline a long essay question. So as far as what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to ask you to read all three prompts. You're going to choose one of the prompts. And then for that prompt, you're going to fill out the protocol, the causation protocol itself. Now, my suggestion, and this part's recommended, it's not required, but I will give feedback for students who do this. I would suggest writing one of the body paragraphs so that you can continue with the practice of using the language of causation and consequence. And that'll allow you to kind of figure out if you're able to really target the prompts that AP is asking you to do. So these are the three prompts. And again, the essays really don't change, and this is how it's going to look like the day of your AP exam. So you pick one of three essays. They usually break it down 1200 to 1750, 1450 to 1900, and then after 1900. And that's how the new AP World Modern exam will look like. You want to have a clear historical defensible thesis, relates to the time period that you chose, have a broader historical context, identify the historical thinking skill. So is it comparison, is it causation, or is it continuity and change? So in many cases, it'll be a continuity and change if you see the word change. Sometimes it's looking at causation as well. And then you want to try to essentially use your evidence to really support your argument. So this is the language of causation and consequence. So I think all these different words can be very useful for you to kind of think through what it is that you want to be able to say as you write this. And then I think the sentence starters are also kind of useful. And I would suggest that you practice writing a couple of sentences in the document so that you can get practice doing that. And then for the summary, considering the factors that each conflict would share in terms of facilitating total war, looking at the specific social and cultural consequences of these wars, and thinking about these factors that cause wars to better explain the significance of unresolved conflicts. In the 20th century, as our larger unit question, the third prompt deals with that, but if you choose one of the other prompts, think about the century that you chose. Okay, so this is the document that you will be working in. So again, you will pick one question, two, three, or four. You will not write out the essay itself, although I would suggest that, let's say you chose question three, that you do write one body paragraph. This is the language of causation and consequence. And this is what what I am going to require you all to do. So this is the protocol worksheet. So what I'd like you to do is consider what are the key facts, name, date of the movement, people involved, what changed. Just above the surface, what might be the immediate cause? What are some other causes that deal with it? Just below the surface, the less obvious, more longer term causes for the movement itself. So thinking about larger historical changes, economic, social, and political trends. And then the deep dive. What are the deep contingencies, the historical forces that may not be immediately obvious by looking at the situation? And I'll just ask, do your best to answer each of these questions. Insert them as comments. If you're not sure, explain why you're not sure. Ask a question so I can give you all feedback on this. So again, this is to give you some practice to help you with the LEQ essay. And I gave you 3 possible prompts to consider. And again, prompt 4 is the only one that deals really specifically with the current unit, but all 3 could be tested on the AP exam. I hope you all have a nice day. Please continue to reach out to me if you have questions.